This is part 2 of 3 video installments. In a previous video, linked in the caption box, I shared my version of a book blessing, which energetically activates the book into a magical tool for me. I think of book activation as giving the book its soul, if that makes any sense. As a spirit guardian for my book, I've summoned a Talpa to live inside this little clay figurine, a gargoyle I got when I visited Notre Dame. My little gargoyle friend is never far from my book and perches atop my grimoire to protect it. The book memorializes my personal work and interactions with the beyond, especially work that is sentimental to me. To help me maintain momentum and discipline, I dedicate a scheduled minimum of 1 to 2 hours per week to sitting with my book and working on it. That and my inner radar is always on for catching designs that I want to incorporate into my grimoire art. So I really put a lot of myself, my time, my energy, my thought into this book. Now, onto the question prompts for the challenge. Pretty much every prompt mentioned for the YouTube Pagan Challenge 2017 is going to be found in my book, from rites for the birth of a child to funeral rites, how to ensure the safe onward passage of a soul, and then, of course, everything in between. The cultural holidays that have endured for centuries, observed in the same manner my ancestors would have observed them, is very important to me and important for me to pass on to my heirs. So tradition is a big part of this book. In my book, I've documented the traditions in my culture for honoring the dead, how to interact with souls, mantra and sutra recitations that are integral to funeral rites, and beliefs and practices around death. They were very important to me for various personal sentimental reasons, and so all of that is in here. The pantheon of names for divinity that are native to my culture, the traditional means for interacting with that divinity, and how to access metaphysical energy through physical objects tend to be focal points as well. I craft with the intention of working directly from my book in the future. So for me, it's not just about writing or sketching in my book, but it's always about empowering the book itself. I memorialize craft tools that are of personal significance and importance to me, and I also memorialize the origins story of certain heirlooms I hope to someday pass on to my heirs. In a nutshell, here's what my book is all about. It's about honoring who I really am, who I descend from, and by practicing centuries-old traditions in the manner my ancestors would have expressed their belief systems, feel that unbroken line of family consciousness. I guess in a way it's my repentance. I spent the first half of my life running away from who I am. Now I'm spending the latter half embracing that identity and, more than that, honoring it. Okay, so where do I start? I start sketching ideas in a scrap notebook, and I tend to do it in a very messy way just to get down the basic structure, layout, or symbolism to be used. And once I know exactly what I'll be doing, then I transfer it over to my book. Sigil work is a huge part of my personal craft, shocker. So there's a ton of that in my book as well. Although my book doesn't document my most used stones and crystals, I do talk about use of stones or crystals in craft. Stones are the most efficient way for me to store and transport energy to another for someone else's benefit. So I do talk a lot about how to store and transport energy through stonework. In terms of my doodles, I try to create a variation on original designs I see, mainly because the original design is often too complicated for me to draw. I start by working lightly in pencil, and once I've got the structural outline, begin working with ink. Any pencil or ink that touches this book, by the way, has been consecrated, and I rarely finish in one sitting. Some of these pages will take me days. Now, from afar, some of these doodles can look complicated, but if you study closely, the lines are really simple and easy for you to replicate. Difficulty level here is pretty low. Patience level, however, is very high. As long as you're patient, even if you have minimal art skills, you can do this. I've learned so much about how focus, persistence, and work ethic can produce magnificence. I take the philosophy my book has taught me and I apply it to real life. How I approach my book is how I approach life and vice versa. And in a funny way, this book inspires me to dream big, aspire big, and never settle for any ambition as being impossible. Of course, errors happen. As I remarked in video 1, I don't usually get hung up on mistakes, and most of the time, these flaws grow on me and become very endearing. But here's one I just can't get over. Okay, so you can't see the flaw now except for that mysterious defiance of gravity from that page. Initially, I wanted to write out these Saddam Sanskrit characters by hand on my own, but I messed up so many times that I was pretty close to erasing a literal hole into the page. So I gave up, cheated, printed out the characters from my computer, cut, and then pasted it into my book. But not only did I paste it into the book, but I used a really cheap elementary school glue stick that was horrible to use, and the end result is a terrible glue job. After the shitty glue dried, it warped the page, so now it defies gravity. Even though I printed out that page and the Sanskrit you see there is printed, I traced over the lines with ink by hand while chanting the mantra and burning incense. So I think everything is still good on the magical end. But yeah, that page is printed, not hand-drawn, because attempting to hand-draw it was a massive failure that almost broke my book. My first video installment was a show and tell, a flip-through of my current working grimoire. This video was a behind-the-scenes look at how I create my grimoire and its content. By the way, not all of my books look like the one I've been showing off here. This one with the pretentious title was from my early college years. Honestly, I don't even know what that title means. The contents don't get any better. What's this? The second law of thermodynamics can be applied to understanding original sin in human nature? What? I remember this book very well, and I'm a little bit ashamed of it, but I will show it to you so there is a fair and balanced presentation of my grimoire work. I kept this book between the ages of 17 and 21. I have working grimoires from even earlier than that, but those are still at my parents' house where I grew up, locked in a storage chest. And here's another old and completed book that's comparatively better than what you just saw, but not by much. So you see, if you've never done this before, you don't just start off with illustrious content and spectacular art. It's going to take a while to get the hang of it and many pages of embarrassment before you get to the stuff you're really proud of. In my final video installment for the 2017 YouTube Pagan Challenge, I'll get personal, revealing, subjective, and opinionated. All questions I haven't yet answered from the challenge will be answered in part 3. Thanks for watching.